Okay. So we're starting our part 2 of why did God allow these bad things to happen. All right. So let's review very quickly. Once again, why is the question of theodicy a Christian question? Question of theodicy is what? Why does an all-powerful, all-loving God allow pain and suffering? Why is that a Christian question, David? You could answer it now this time, right?
Only the Christian God in the Bible, only the Christian God says is supposed to be loving, omniscient, omnipresent.
Right. So that question itself presupposes a Christian God, not a Hindu God, not a Buddhist God, not an Islam. Oh, it could be an Islam God, right? Not a New Age God. Okay, it presupposes a Christian God. Okay, so why are we looking, Nicole? Why are we looking in the Bible to find an answer? Why not Quran? Why not science books? Why not Vedas, which are the Hindu sacred books? Why are we looking in the Bible? Right. Okay, because that conception of an all-loving, all-powerful God only is within the Christian Bible. Okay, so once again, if you're asking why does an all-powerful, all-loving God allow pain and suffering, that question itself, you can only get that from the Bible. So therefore, you must also find an answer from the Bible. So once again, if you think of pain and suffering, okay, what book do you guys think of?
Job.
Okay, the book of Job. Okay, so all of you guys have your Bibles this time, right?
Yeah.
Very good. So let's see it. Now, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, but there's a lot of different details that the book of Job has. One of the first things that we see about Job is that he is a blameless and a righteous man. Okay? That's what it says. And second thing, we see that he's very rich as well. Very, very, very rich. But right away, in chapter 1, a lot of bad things happen to this guy. Okay, so right here, this is a summary. He loses his wealth, he loses his children, and he loses his health as well. Okay. How does he respond? Okay, from here, we're going to read together from Job chapter 1, verse 20 to 22. Okay, Job chapter 1. Okay, who's there? Whoever's there, please read it for us.
20, 21.
Mm-hmm.
Then Job arose and rent. Oh man, I'm in King James.
All right, someone who's more modern and not a fundamentalist.
Okay.
Just kidding.
Then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshipped. And he said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord."
Okay. So what does he do? He does what people in the ancient time, what they did. Okay, which is they show their sorrow physically.
By ripping their clothes.
Okay, and everything else.
Caiaphas.
Sorry, I don't mean to disrupt. Sorry.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
But the interesting part for us, okay, the interesting part for us is in verse 21, right?
Yes.
And 21. And 20, okay, specifically 21. But he basically says what? All of these bad things that happened to me, the wealth that I lost, the children I've lost, the health that I had, all of these things came from God. And if God wants to take these things away, so be it. I will still praise God even though all these bad things happen, okay? By the way, do you guys know the song, "Blessed be the name of the Lord"? Yeah, that's based off on this. You give and take away. Yeah, okay, it's from here. Okay? He said, "Blessed be the name of the Lord" still. And then 22, throughout all this, Job did not what? Sin or blame God for anything. Okay, so we see that what he says, he's not sinning against God. He's not blaming God. But what is one thing he is doing? Okay, who is he attributing all these bad things that's happening in his life to? God. Okay, he's not blaming God. He doesn't blame God. But he attributes, he says, the loss of my wealth, loss of my children, loss of my health, God took all of these things away. Does that make sense? He's not blaming God. He's saying, God, you gave me these things and you want to take it away. That's fine, but God's still responsible. I don't blame you though. Does that make sense? All right. Now, the question that we need to ask is, okay, is it possible that Job is wrong? Okay, one more time. Is it possible that Job is wrong? Okay, we're going to get there. Because we actually see from Job chapter 1, if you actually go back on the chapter, we're going to actually see that Job was actually very, very wrong. Okay, let's go back to Job chapter 1, verse 6 and 7. Whoever is there, please read it for us.
One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming through the earth and going back and forth in it."
Okay. So we see that God, and some versions say angel, some versions say actually, the Hebrew word actually says sons of man. Okay, or sons of God, I mean. Okay, so there's a lot of different theories, but it seems like God and several other people, they're having some kind of meeting. Okay, and now all of a sudden, Satan comes in. And God asks Satan a very interesting question, which is, it's almost like, God, why would you even ask that question? Okay? He asked the question, what? Where are you coming from? And so you, as a reader, you're saying, why would God ask that? Right? Unless, how about this? Okay? Is it possible that God is asking because they're actually having a meeting, and he's asking, what right do you have to be in this meeting? And then Satan says here, he says, I have been roaming through the earth and walking around it. So he's basically saying, I represent earth. I have free reign, because he's saying, I can go this way, I can go this way, I can walk on it. I have free reign around the earth. So is it possible, okay, again, it doesn't say that explicitly here, okay, but is it possible that just for argument's sake, perhaps he's saying, I represent earth. I'm a representative of the earth. Okay, so I'll give you some reasons why I think this is possible. So we know that Satan actually becomes the ruler of the earth. We don't know exactly how this happened, but we know that Adam and Eve, we talked about it in the sermon as well, in Genesis 1 and 2, when God created Adam and Eve, he actually made them kings and queens of this earth. But because of sin came into the world, and somehow, we don't know exactly how it happened, but the rulership actually went from Adam and Eve to Satan. How do I know that? Okay, I'm not making this up. Right there in 2 Corinthians, Satan, who is God, or ruler of this world, has blinded the minds of those who don't believe. They are unable to see the glorious light of the good news. Do you guys see that? So he's in this verse, Paul is basically saying, hey, there's people out there who won't believe the gospel. Why? Because there's another ruler of this world, and he's preventing people from believing the gospel. Okay, I'll give you one more. John chapter 12. This is actually Jesus speaking. Now judgment is upon this world. Now the ruler of this world will be cast out. Okay, so obviously he's not talking about human beings, because he said throughout, God so loved the world. Right? So he's talking about Satan. So there's another ruler. Does that make sense, guys? Any questions?
I have a question on verse 8, like chapter 1, verse 8.
Okay, we'll get there. Not yet. We'll get there though. Good. But so far, do you guys understand do you guys kind of get a overall picture? God is having some, seems like perhaps, even maybe, okay, maybe he's having a council meeting with all the different earth. Does that make sense? Okay, again, you don't have to believe that, but maybe that's just a possibility. And then so they're having a meeting, and then Satan comes in and God says, "Who do you represent?" And Satan says, "I'm the ruler of the earth." Does that make sense? Okay. Now this is where we get to the hard part. Okay, we're going to read from verse 8 through 12. Whoever wants to read it, please read it for us.
Sure. Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. Does Job fear God for nothing?" Satan replied, Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks are herds and spread throughout the land. But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, Very well then, everything he has is in your power, but on the man himself do not lay a finger. Then Satan went out for the presence of the Lord.
Okay. You guys understand the situation? So he says, "I represent the earth." And all of a sudden God says, "You know Job? He worships me." Okay? And then all of a sudden Satan says, "Well, duh, he's rich. He has a lot of stuff. You blessed him. Of course he's going to worship you." Okay? And then Satan says, "Take away all these things, he ain't going to worship you." And then God says, for some reason, he says, "Fine, let's see how this goes." Okay? And a lot of people, even Christians, but specifically skeptics, but even Christians, have been very, very bothered by this text. Why does God even go along with this game? Does that make sense? You see how people would be bothered by this?
Yeah.
All right. Question for you guys. Number 1. Who mentioned Job first?
God.
Who mentions Job? Who? God. So don't answer right now if you know the answer. But why? Why does God mention Job? Okay, just think about that. Okay, rhetorical question for now. Okay, second part though. Okay, who suggests suffering and pain? Satan though. Okay, good. Okay, very good. Okay, now this is the important part. Who afflicts suffering and pain?
What is affliction?
Afflict meaning who did the pain and suffering? Who gives? Satan. Okay, so do you guys see what I'm saying? So in that sense, Job is wrong.
Oh yeah, because he said God was.
He said God did it. God is the one who did all these things to me. But it's actually not God. Does that make sense? Now, I mean, I'm not saying that now everything is solved, because we still have a big question, because, okay, at least for a case of Job then, the question is not, why does God afflict pain and suffering?
Satan did it.
Because Satan did it. Does that make sense, guys? Okay, a big difference. It's not God who's doing it, at least for this story. But we still have a big question, which is,
Why God allow it?
why does God allow that? Because God didn't need to allow that, it seems like. Does that make sense? All right. So once again, okay, we have to find the answer from the Bible. That make sense? All right. Any questions so far? Yes.
The first question, why Paul mentioned Job first, and why? So I think it wasn't because like in the verse before, Jesus telling Satan, "You're in the power of the whole earth, you have power." But yet God is saying, "Okay, you have the power," but then after that he's like, "Did you consider my servant Job?" Like, so I think at that point God was challenging Satan.
Okay.
Because he's saying, "Okay, well, you have the power, but you don't have the power."
Okay. So maybe perhaps God's challenging Satan.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a starting point. Okay. Okay. So again, let's go actually read the whole Bible for the answer itself. Okay? Because the reason why a lot of people actually get confused about the book of Job is because they're not looking at it from a whole biblical perspective. Okay? And that's very important. Because
biblical perspective, like the great controversy.
Yeah,
thing,
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
is-
Okay? Because, like for example, if I just saw 1 second of your life, or even just one day of your life, and judge you based on that, that wouldn't make sense. Does that make sense? And that's why it's unfair for me to just judge people, right? Because a lot of times we don't know their whole history, right? I could just say, "Oh, that person is a jerk," but what if, like a good example is like this came out from the book Seven Highly Effective Habits or something. Habits of this. But anyways, and then there was a story of somebody in the subway, and then like one kid is just like running around everywhere, right? And then like the dad is doing nothing to stop him, right? And then one of the person, it got so annoying. One person went up, the author went up to the dad and said, "Hey, like I know like kids are hard, but like you need to control this guy, right?" And then that's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. My wife actually just died, and I'm just so in shock. I'm just, you know what I mean?" So that totally changes your perspective. Does that make sense? So same thing with Job as well. Okay, I mean, I'm not saying this is easy by any means, but we have to understand this book within the context of the whole Bible as well. Does that make sense? All right. So I'm sure some of you guys have heard this term before, the Great Controversy. Okay, so again, this is we're shortening the Bible study a lot, but I'm gonna just give you a timeline within the Bible, and I'm gonna give you biblical references as well, just to let you guys know that everything here comes from the Bible. Okay, right? Because why? Our whole thing is we have to find an answer from the Bible, not from what I think. Okay, but from the Bible. Okay. First, we see that a guy named Lucifer. Okay, Lucifer actually means morning star. Okay. Lucifer is created blameless and beautiful. God places him as a covering cherub, which basically, in other words, he became one of like the top angels. Beauty gets to him somehow, and he wants to become higher than God. He starts spreading rumors about God, basically saying, "Hey, I think I can do a better job than God." Okay, kind of probably similar to Genesis 3, where he says, "Do you think God really knows what he's doing?" Okay, he's hiding stuff from us. He's not a good God, right? He's actually acting like he's a good God, but he's actually just oppressing you guys. That's what he basically said to Adam and Eve is, "You're not going to die." He's lying. He's only telling you not to eat it because you could get more power. You can become like God. He knows that, okay? So again, maybe perhaps Satan was doing similar things like that. Number 5, third of the angels actually go to his side and they become corrupted as well. Okay? There's a big war in heaven between these angels and God, but obviously they lose because they're not powerful enough. Satan loses and gets tossed into the earth with his angels. Any question here so far? Yes.
Last point. I
Yeah.
think a lot of Christians, when you say Satan lives and gets tossed, a lot of with his angels down there. So when people think of like evil spirits and like haunted houses, when they think of that, very they think that actually these are the angels used to be and now they're evil spirits. And so some people believe that actually evil spirits used to be angels.
Yeah. Definitely possibility.
Yeah. So a lot of Christians think that verse is clearly why people believe in what they believe in evil spirits because of these.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, any other question about this? Again, all the references is up there if you guys want to look at it. All right. But question we need to ask here is, why didn't God just get rid of Satan? Okay. Do you guys see that? Because if God just killed Satan right there, got rid of all the angels right there, then they wouldn't have been sent to the earth. They wouldn't have tempted Adam and Eve. And no Adam and Eve, then perhaps this world would be a sinless place without people like stories like Raymond and Brittany or coronavirus Okay, all of these pain and suffering. So why didn't God just get rid of Satan?
Because that wouldn't be fair. That wouldn't be a just God.
Why? Why not?
Because,
They rebelled against God.
right.
In a king, right?
But
If a king,
God's given them the freedom. God gives them the freedom of
Right.
peace. So instead of just killing you and like getting rid of you, then everyone will think that I'm not a fair God. I'm not just.
why? Why isn't that just?
Well, because I'm.
Because, for example, okay,
Yeah.
let's say in your house, okay, your roommate decided to say, well, I think I think I like Maggot's room better, so I'm gonna go try to get his room
Yeah.
and steal that.
Right, but that's God. Why don't I just get rid of him? It's because what if I just like let's say I'm president of the United States, and Mike is my vice president, so I don't like Mike, right? So I'm just gonna kill him.
But that's not the case. This is not God just disliking him.
Okay.
This is Mike trying to usurp and kill the president.
Yeah.
The president has every
I
right
think
then.
it's more. I think it's more easier. It's easier than that. Just because then his love is conditional.
Why?
Because it's saying, if God were to get rid of sin, it's like I only love you if you obey my commands. If you do what I want you to do. That's conditional love. And love can't be conditional.
Okay, very good. All of these discussions, very good. So then why does Jesus die? If God's love is conditional.
I don't get that question.
Why does Jesus die for us, our sins, if God's love is unconditional? Why is death required in an unconditional God who could love us, forgive us, if God is unconditional?
Because that's still. Because the wages of sin is death.
But that doesn't make sense. You just told me love is unconditional. So God should still love us.
Oh, yeah, okay, so because if Satan sinned, he should just
No,
expedite his death.
exactly.
Yeah.
Why doesn't God just get rid of Satan?
Because if people,
Okay, good. You guys are thinking. Okay, we'll get there. All right. This is very, very important because a lot of people actually don't understand. Okay. Great controversy. What is the nature of the great controversy? This is very important. A lot of people actually don't understand this part. What's the nature of the great controversy? What are they fight? Okay, what is controversy? A fight between. Okay, fight between just people, right? Two people arguing about something. So basically, I'm asking, what are they arguing about? God and Satan. What are they arguing about?
Is God truly loving?
Okay, God's character. That's very important. Okay, they're not fighting over power. Okay, they're not fighting over beauty. They're fighting over character. Now, this is very, very important. Okay, because look here. Let me skip this. Okay, if they were fighting over who's stronger, okay, maybe Satan is saying I'm stronger and God's saying no, I'm stronger. What could they do?
Contest.
Have a contest. You like that?
They did have battle.
Okay,
It was a war already.
but that wasn't why because God already knows who's stronger, obviously.
Satan does too.
Okay, so they could just do like an arm wrestling battle, and they could just say, okay, God, you won. Then the great controversy is over. There is no controversy. Does that make sense? All right. What if it's about beauty? What can they do? Okay, have a vote. Okay, get all the
Asian
people.
representation.
Okay, get some Asian representation.
Yeah.
You see how other people, they're like overreacting, but the Asian guy is just like, come on, man. I don't need to do anything. Basically, right? But for Lucifer, beauty was important, right? He said, I want to be more beautiful, more powerful than God. But again, if that was the case, they could just get all the angels and say, vote. They don't need to fight about that. Does that make sense? All right. But how do you judge character?
action.
Okay, can you have, okay, so for example, let's say me and David, we knew each other for a long time. But I start spreading rumor, and I start saying, guys, David is actually a fake. Like, I know this guy from a long time ago, and he's just like, He's faking all of this like positivity, all this stuff, but he's just like a con man. And he actually like gets your like social like all your like personal information and sells it. Okay? But at that time, David is actually going around saying, dude, I knew Gideon from a long time ago, and this guy is a total fake. Like he's saying he's a pastor, but at night he actually sells drugs
He goes to the Mexican border.
and does all these like negative things. Okay, does that make sense? So how do you test this? Do you want us to do arm wrestling and see who fights till? Does that show care? Does that no? How about if you guys vote to see? Oh, I trust David more. I trust Kitty more. Does that even if
Justify.
David or I got higher vote, that still doesn't prove whether David is right or Gideon is right. Does that make sense? So, going back. Now, this is very important. Why didn't God just get rid of Satan? From what we talked about just now, you should get an answer to this. Why didn't God just get rid of Satan?
Because it doesn't justify his character always being correct.
Yeah, his question had that won't solve the question.
Exactly.
That won't solve the question.
Okay? That doesn't solve any question at all. Because imagine, I say to David, David is a liar, and all of a sudden David shoots me.
No,
Where does that leave David?
he's a bad guy.
He's the bad guy. Does that make sense? That doesn't justify, okay? It doesn't vindicate his character at all. Does that make sense? So because of the nature of the controversy itself, there's things that God is limited to. Not because God is a limited God, but because of the nature of the controversy itself, if God does certain things, it actually backfires on. Does that make sense? That's very, very important. Okay, any questions so far? Okay. Who mentions Job first? God. Why? Think about the great controversy. Okay? So again, now you're not looking at just the book of Job, but you're looking at the whole great controversy. The great controversy is still going on. Okay, still going on. And then Satan comes in, and all of a sudden, randomly, God mentions Job. Why?
Justify Jacob's character.
Whose character?
Job.
No. Why? Why does he? Because we already know about Job. We already know that he's a blameless and upright person. Even God says that about Job. Okay?
God's character.
So Job has an understanding of God's character. He believes in him and worships him. But then Satan's like, well, what if
No. We're not getting there. We're just saying, why does God mention Job? Why does God mention Job?
Job's one of the people that
Okay, again, let's go back to the great controversy. The great controversy is what? Satan is continuing to go around and tell people God is not a good God. God is an oppressive God. God is a lying God. God is just doing an act. He's a fake. Okay, don't trust him. Don't believe him. From that ongoing discussion, God mentions Job. Why?
is evidence of God's character.
Good. Okay, how can Job be an evidence to God's character?
His life.
His faith in God.
Huh?
His faith in God.
The way he lives. The way that Job is.
Okay, so let's go back to me and David's case.
Okay.
So we're blaming each other. He's saying, no, Gideon is, at night he does all these things. So I go, judge, I'm going to bring a witness. I'm going to bring a witness.
Who's a witness?
Okay? I'm going to bring Grace as my witness. Have her speak behalf of me. Does that make sense? Okay, so again, Why is God mentioning Job? Because God's saying, this guy, he clearly knows me and worships me. So he can vouch for me that I am a good God.
Oh, I see.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? But Satan here says what?
Paid him off.
You paid him off.
Yeah.
You paid him off. Duh. Of course he's going to say good things about you. Look at his life. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Okay? Now, this is very important. Why did God allow pain and suffering for Job then? Think about the great controversy. Okay, so again, the dialogue is Satan keeps saying, no, you're a bad God, you're a manipulative God, you're a lying God. Says, jury, I bring my witness. But Satan says, come on.
She got his character.
He's trying to prove that he wasn't paid off.
Trying to prove that Satan's wrong.
God's trying to prove Job wasn't paid off.
Okay.
He should disprove Satan's rebuttal.
Okay.
But
Does
I
that make
think-
sense?
Yeah.
Because, okay, if God just says, no, we're not doing this, then what happens?
Back to square one.
We're back to square one. If anything,
He looks worse.
he looks worse.
Yeah.
He looks worse.
Yeah.
And what Satan said is
Yeah.
valid.
Does that make sense? So, for example, I bring Grace in to our, right? And I say, my wife knows me. And then David says, well, let's look at our bank account and see how much money Gideon actually gave her to testify. Let's test it. Does that make sense? And I go, no, we don't need to see that.
That's hectic.
Okay, what happens?
You look bad.
I look bad. Okay, does that make sense? This is not, okay, this is very, very important. This is not God wanting to do this. This is not God's choice. Okay, this is not God, ooh, let's see, let's test. That's what a lot of people think about Book of Job is. Ooh, let's test this guy. Let's see if he can handle all the pain. That's clearly not it. Because from the beginning, if you look at Job chapter 1, God actually says, yeah, Job is a blameless, righteous. God doesn't need to judge this guy. Does that make sense? Or some people say, oh, they wanted to have a bet, and God knew that Job was not going to sin. So God's not wanting to do a bet. Does that make sense? He's trying to vindicate his character to the whole universe. Okay? But he's placed almost in a corner. He has no choice but to. Because if he doesn't, then again, Satan wins again. Or, even if that doesn't necessarily prove Satan, it creates doubt. Seed of doubt for people. Just like what I did. I just said, no, Grace, you don't need to show your phone. You don't need to show your bank. You see? And it creates doubt. Oh, what if what David said is true? Does that make sense? Yeah, what if the rumors are true? So once again, when we look at the book of Job, in the light of the whole Bible and the grand meta narrative, which is the great controversy, then again, the book of Job, again, it's not comfortable. It's not something we like. But again, we get a glimpse of why these things happen. Now, a couple of things. When I first heard about this, I said, first question that came into my mind was, that's fine. It makes sense of why God allowed pain and suffering for Job. But I said to the teacher, I raised my hand, I said, but that's not fair for Job. Okay? It's like collateral damage. Do you guys know what collateral damage is? Like two people, like for example, let's say me and David, we get so heated, and we start like fighting, and then like Jeremy's like trying to come and stop us, and like we like hit him instead, and we kill him.
Yeah.
That's collateral damage. That's totally unfair for Jeremy. Because of our controversy, he gets the worst of it. It seems like, you see, and same thing with Job as well. It's because of God and Satan's controversy. Why does Job get into this? Does that make sense? So I said that this is totally unfair for Job. And then I think I really liked what the teacher said. He said that's absolutely correct. That this is totally unfair for Job, but you have to also understand that this is totally unfair for God as well. Because this is not the universe that God has created. Like, this is not the way he wanted these things to go. Right? And yet, okay, it's totally unfair for the whole universe, a loving God. Imagine you're a loving God and you have created this whole universe. But again, everybody is out to get you and saying you're a horrible God. You're not a good God. This is totally unfair for God as well. So, vindication is vindication. It basically means to justify yourself. Now, some people, if you actually look throughout the Bible, this is actually a phrase that God uses a lot, which is, I'm doing this for my name's sake. Okay? For example, if you look at like Israel, Isaiah and the prophets book, it tells you like the Israelites, they keep messing up over and over and over again, but God says, but for my name's sake, I will forgive them. Okay? Again, if you look at the great controversy, that expression, it makes more sense. Okay? Now, for some people that says, God's so selfish. Right? Why is he like trying to vindicate just himself? And he's like using, it seems like, again, the word used is probably not good, but some people take it as, oh, he's using people to vindicate himself. Does that make sense? Right? That's unfair. But actually, look, our relationship right here is totally based on trust, if you think about it. Any relationship. If David came and started like accusing me of stuff, what happens immediately to our relationships here? It changes. And if I just say, what, I don't care what Jeremy thinks or Maggie thinks of me. You know what? I'm a good person. I don't care what they think of me. Okay? Then basically I'm saying that my relationship with these guys are not that important. It doesn't matter. But if I say, no, Jeremy, no, I need to tell you, I need to clear my name somehow. And that's what vindication is. Vindication is trying to clear your name. If I'm trying to say, no, Jeremy, no, he's wrong. Like, I need to vindicate. Does that make sense? Vindication is not selfish. Vindication is actually required in a loving relationship. So if God is trying to vindicate his name, it's for us. He already knows. He doesn't need to vindicate anybody. He doesn't need to name anybody. But if he needs to clear up his name because he wants a loving relationship with us, that's very, very important. Does that make sense?
Because he cares about the relationship.
He does. He cares about the relationship. Okay, so again, that shows us a very, very loving God. That he could, if he wanted to, really, he could just say, okay, new world, start over. But again, he's pursuing after these human beings who have totally gone against him. So one of the things, we're not going to actually read the whole context, but Isaiah 5, I'll just summarize it. It talks about this, a farmer who plants a vineyard. Okay, he creates a perfect farm. And he says this, he says in verse 4, actually in verse 3, it talks about how he did everything good, but he only got rotten grapes out of that vineyard. Okay? And the phrase he uses is, what more was there to do that I have not done? Okay? What more was there to do that I have not done? So this is essentially what he's telling us. Okay? He's telling us on the cross to each and every one of us, because every one of us, we are affected by Satan's lie. Right? And that's why we have a hard time giving control over to God. Because we still, inside of us, we go, but what if God takes me to a place where, I don't want to be? He's just trying to control me. But God's trying to say, what more do you want me to do for you? To show you my character. So in essence, the cross actually was the greatest vindication of his name. Because, okay, and this is one of the things I always go back to, because there's a lot of things in the Bible I don't understand. There's a lot of stories, especially in the Old Testament, and even New Testament too, but specifically the Old Testament, where I just don't understand how that's a loving God or a fair God. I don't understand it. But what doesn't make sense whatsoever is, if God is an oppressive God, if God is a controlling God, if God is a lying God, Why is he sending his one and only begotten Son to die for me? Does that make sense? Like, that makes zero sense whatsoever. If God is a horrible God. So the cross actually gives us the full picture of who God really is. That he's willing to sacrifice, he's willing to become humble, and he's willing to love his neighbor. Right, so for example, let's say instead of like me fighting against David, even though David is saying all these negative things to him, I still feed him, I still love him, I still wash his feet. And let's say when David is like he's walking out and the car is trying to come, and I jump in and die for David instead,
True love.
then you guys are like, okay, this guy's obviously lying.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So again, the cross actually gives us the full vindication of God's character. That God is a good God. All right, let's go back to a story of Raymond and Brittany. Just for Magid, basically Raymond, of course, he lied to Brittany, and then he did bad things to her. Okay, so he ran away, and then they found him. Okay, they found him, and then in court, Brittany saw him in the eyes and said, "Yes, that was the man who did all these bad things to me." So he was convicted, and he got life sentence in prison. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this story is because this is really, really interesting story, because one of the things, I mean, most people, when they get convicted, they go, I messed up, but the thing is, he continued to say, I did nothing wrong. I didn't do it. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. So that's why he got such a long sentence in prison.
Wow.
Yeah, because if you just say, yeah, I messed up, I did it, maybe you get like 10 years, 20 years, you get parole maybe, but he got nothing, right? Because he continued to say, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong.
So he thinks that was not wrong.
No. He says, I'm
Oh, so
I'm not the person.
Oh.
We got the wrong person. Wrong person.
Oh.
I didn't do it. No,
I see.
you
You're
guys.
saying like
No.
I did it. Yeah, that's not like I did it, but
No. He's saying, no, you guys got the wrong person. I'm not. I didn't do anything wrong. Okay. 5 years goes past by. Doesn't change. Continue to say it. His families came and said, dude, just say you did wrong, and just get a better. You're in life in prison anyways. He continues to say, I didn't do anything wrong. Okay. 20 years passes. Okay. 30 years passes. He continues to say, I didn't do anything wrong. Okay. So finally, okay, somehow they did DNA testing. Okay, and they realized he was right. That wasn't him.
Oh my god.
It wasn't him.
Mercy.
It wasn't him. They got the wrong guy.
Give him $2 million.
No, they got the wrong guy. So what happened was, obviously this is a very, very sensitive issue. They needed a scapegoat. Okay, the police needed to find, you know what I mean? Like, if this guy just go missing, and he's a black guy too, right? And raped a white girl. So they found somebody very similar, right? And Brittany, she's a young girl. Imagine all the traumatic experiences she went. She's like, yeah, it's that guy. You know what I mean? 29 years later.
You guys aren't even 29.
29 years later in prison.
Coming out smiling.
Yeah, he came out smiling. Okay, now, this is very important. Very important. Hey, listen. When I told you guys that he was a rapist, how did you see him? As a rapist.
Yeah.
Look at him. He looks like a horrible person.
Actually, that was too nice of a picture.
But,
Yeah.
okay, but, now that you know he's an innocent man, he's not that bad. Okay? So good. That's okay. So hey, listen. So this is exactly what vindication does. It changes. Jeremy said it best. Perspective. If I told you that he was a rapist, and if you guys walked out of this Bible study knowing that, you would have looked at him and said, this is the worst person in the world. But now you look at him, he's the most unfortunate person, and that sucks. That he had to go through 30 years of prison. That's why David's like, can't believe he had to go through that.
You guys aren't even 29. You guys haven't even lived 29 years.
Okay? So that's the same thing for God. Okay? There's so many people blaming God for all the bad things that's happening in this world. But again, look at Jesus. He's taking the full blunt of the pain and suffering. And he's saying, no, none of these things, I wanted these things to happen. Okay? So when we look at pain and suffering in our life, we look at Jesus. And that's one of the craziest thing about Christianity is that, like all other gods, right? All other religions, like their gods are like all happy and dory and stuff like that. But only within Christianity we actually see God dying, okay? Suffering a sinner's death. Okay. All right. Any question about? Again, this was just for Book of Job, though, right? But again, we see a situation because of the great controversy where God, okay, again, now it's very important we don't extrapolate this and say, oh, everything that bad happened to me in life is Satan. I'm not saying that, okay? But I'm just showing you one possibility, okay, of Job's case where we actually see that it was actually not God. But we also see why God does allow pain and suffering in this world. Okay? Any questions?